I'm Madeline Carter. I'm 27 years old, and I never imagined I'd wake up after a near-fatal car crash, bruised, broken, and alone, only to hear my mother's voicemail cheerfully announcing, "We're heading to Rome with Tyler, don't call us while we're gone." I had metal rods in both legs, stitches across my stomach, and a heart that felt more shattered than anything the accident had touched. While I lay in a hospital bed fighting to breathe, my parents were boarding a plane, paid for with my credit card, to enjoy a vacation they'd planned for weeks. They left me when I needed them most, laughed over cappuccinos while I couldn't lift my arms. But what they didn't expect was that their Roman holiday would mark the end of their free ride. Before I tell you how I reclaimed my life, my voice, and every dollar they ever took from me, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button if you've ever had to draw a hard boundary with family, and subscribe to hear how I canceled more than just their return flight. I grew up in Portland, Oregon, in a house that looked like it belonged in a Norman Rockwell painting. My father, Thomas Carter, was a high school history teacher, the kind who wore corduroy blazers and carried around a leather briefcase filled with lesson plans written by hand. My mother, Linda, ran a small bookkeeping business out of our kitchen. She was the type who remembered everyone's birthday, kept the pantry labeled, and believed in handwritten thank you notes. Our house had white shutters, a small garden in front, and a porch swing that creaked whenever the wind picked up. From the outside, we looked steady, safe, familiar. I was the oldest child and the quiet one. My little brother, Tyler, was the golden boy from the moment he could dribble a basketball. He had the kind of charm that made people lean in when he talked. He was taller than me by middle school, louder than me by high school, and undeniably more magnetic to our parents. They didn't mean to play favorites, not out loud, but over time, the balance became visible in ways only someone on the losing end could spot. At dinner, they asked about his games, his stats, his friends. When I spoke about books or grades or dreams that didn't involve crowds cheering under gymnasium lights, they nodded politely, then circled back to Tyler. Still, I told myself we were close, every summer. We drove out to the coast and spent a weekend in Seaside. We took family photos with everyone wearing flannel. My dad taught us both how to parallel park in the church parking lot. My mom always made 2 birthday cakes, chocolate for Tyler, vanilla for me. I held on to those small gestures like proof. We were a family. It didn't matter that I sometimes felt like I was standing just outside the frame. I worked hard in school. Honors classes, science fairs, tutoring other students. I didn't complain when Tyler got a car for his 16th birthday while I took the city bus. I didn't ask for much because I knew they didn't have much to give. And when I got the full-ride scholarship to Oregon State, tuition, books, housing, everything covered, I thought that would be the moment things shifted. I thought they would see me. They were proud, or at least, they said they were. But their pride seemed more like relief. Relief that my future wouldn't cost them a dime. Relief that they could stay focused on Tyler's tournaments, his travel leagues, his dream of going pro. When college graduation came, I invited them months in advance. I bought an extra ticket in case my grandmother wanted to come. I called to remind them of the date, the time, the building on campus, but the night before the ceremony, my mom called. She sounded tired, or maybe just distracted. Tyler had made it to the regional finals with his community league team. His game was scheduled for the same morning as my graduation. It's just bad timing. "Sweetie," she said, "we're so proud of you. We'll celebrate later." Okay, the next day, I walked across the stage in my cap and gown, smiling at a crowd full of strangers. I looked into the sea of faces and saw no one I knew. And in that quiet moment, the thought came to me, not loud or bitter, just clear. I could win every award, cross every finish line, build a life they'd be proud of, and still be invisible. After graduation, I moved back to Portland and got a job as a junior developer at a mid-sized tech company called Linux Systems. It wasn't glamorous. The office had fluorescent lighting, a slow elevator, and vending machines that ate your dollars more often than they gave you snacks. But I liked the work. I liked solving problems that had answers. I stayed late, volunteered for weekend projects, and took every opportunity to learn from the senior engineers. My manager once told me I was the kind of employee you don't see coming until you're suddenly depending on them. That stuck with me. By the time I turned 25, I had moved from junior developer to senior software engineer. My salary crossed six figures for the first time. I rented a quiet apartment with hardwood floors and enough light to grow plants. I treated myself to a reliable car, not new, but one with seat warmers and a working stereo. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was building something of my own. It didn't take long for my parents to notice. At first, it was subtle. My dad called one evening, voice strained, asking if I could help cover a credit card payment. Just this month, he said. The interest was getting out of control. My mom called 2 weeks later, asking if I knew a good dentist. Her crown had cracked, and they didn't have dental insurance anymore. I sent over $1,500 that month and told myself it was the right thing to do. After all, they had raised me, they had sacrificed, and they were grateful. Tearfully so. My mom wrote me a handwritten note, her handwriting still perfect, thanking me for being such a blessing. My dad said he was proud of the woman I'd become, that I was the responsible one. I felt useful, needed, like maybe now they finally saw me. But the calls didn't stop. By fall, I was paying their mortgage. In winter, I started covering both their car payments. When tax season came, they asked if I could help pay off what they owed, just until things stabilized. Tyler had dropped out of college by then, said school wasn't for him. He moved back in with my parents, picking up part-time jobs that never lasted more than a few weeks. He's still figuring things out, my mom would say. He just needs time. And so I gave them time. And money. I set up automatic transfers. I tracked everything in a spreadsheet. $1,200 for the mortgage, $400 each for the cars, $2,000 for household expenses, $500 monthly for Tyler's career development. It started to look less like help and more like payroll. I didn't complain. Not at first. I was making good money, and I loved my job. But I was also working 60-hour weeks, skipping vacations, and eating frozen dinners in a studio apartment while my parents renovated their backyard with a hot tub and new patio furniture. Tyler posted pictures of the upgrades on Instagram, captioned Carter HQ leveling up, and I'd stare at them in the break room at work, unsure whether to laugh or cry. There was a Sunday afternoon when I stopped by their house unannounced. My mom was in the backyard, sipping iced tea under a new pergola. My dad was grilling steaks. Tyler was lounging by the pool in sunglasses I was pretty sure he hadn't paid for. They looked surprised to see me, not unhappy, exactly, just unprepared, as if I'd walked into someone else's life. "We were just talking about you," my mom said, hugging me loosely. "You've been working too hard. You need to relax more." I looked around at the life they'd built, on my back, and didn't know how to answer. That night, I lay awake in my apartment, listening to the hum of my fridge and the silence that followed. I kept thinking about something my manager once said during a quarterly review: be careful not to become indispensable in ways that hurt you. At the time, I thought he was talking about overtime. I didn't realize how deeply those words would settle in me. I wasn't just the responsible one now. I was the provider, the safety net, the reason the lights stayed on in their house, and the reason Tyler could float from one whim to another without consequence, and somewhere along the way, gratitude had faded into expectation. My success didn't inspire pride anymore. It created dependency, and the more I gave, the less they seemed to see me at all. By the time I turned 26, the numbers on my spreadsheet were starting to alarm me. Nearly $10,000 a month. Gone. And none of it toward my future. No mortgage of my own. No retirement savings beyond the bare minimum. Just a pile of bills that didn't even belong to me. I was running full speed on a treadmill that never slowed down, and I was doing it alone. So I made a decision. One small change to start. I told my parents I'd need to reduce the monthly allowance, not stop it entirely. Just scale back. Enough to finally start saving for a down payment on a home. Something modest. Something mine. The call didn't go as I'd hoped. My mother went silent on the other end, then sniffled into the phone. "I just don't understand," she said. "After everything we've done for you." My father's voice followed, louder, clipped. So you're saying we don't matter anymore, that your family is too much of a burden. I tried to explain. I talked about balance, sustainability, fairness. But my words landed like accusations. They reminded me of my college tuition, which had been covered by scholarships. They brought up birthday parties and braces and how family means sacrifice. Tyler chimed in via group text later that night, calling me selfish and accusing me of abandoning them just when he was finally getting back on track. I left the conversation feeling gutted. It was the first time I had tried to advocate for myself, and the fallout was instant. Guilt, sharper than I'd anticipated, settled into my chest like stone. Maybe I was being ungrateful. Maybe I was the problem. 2 weeks later, after a 14-hour day at work, I found myself driving home under heavy rain. It was late, past midnight, and the roads were nearly empty. My shoulders ached. My mind replayed the last phone call with my mother, and I missed the yellow light turning red at the intersection of Burnside and 21st. The other driver didn't. A flash of headlights, the sound of metal crushing like paper, tires screaming. Then silence. I woke up 2 days later, in a hospital bed surrounded by soft beeping, white light, and a pain so deep it had no shape. My legs were immobilized. My ribs felt like glass. My head pulsed behind my eyes. I couldn't lift my arms without trembling. A nurse noticed I was awake and leaned in gently. Her name was Sophie. Her voice was calm and warm, as if she'd been speaking to me every day, waiting for this moment. "You've been through a lot," she said softly. "You're lucky to be alive." I blinked slowly, trying to gather my thoughts, trying to remember what had happened. It came back in fragments: the rain, the red light, the force of impact. I tried to speak, but it came out dry and cracked. Sophie brought water and held the cup to my lips. After a few sips, I managed one clear word: family. She nodded. "We notified them the night you were brought in. They came while you were unconscious. Stayed for a bit." My heart lifted for a moment, relief rushing in. "But," she added gently, "they haven't been back. And they didn't leave a message about returning. That didn't make sense. Surely they were just overwhelmed. Maybe they were coming back later. Maybe they thought I'd be asleep longer." I asked for my phone and cradled it awkwardly in my bandaged hand. There were no missed calls, no texts, just a voicemail from my mom, time-stamped the morning after the crash. I pressed play. Her voice was cheerful, almost giddy. "Hi, honey. It's Mom. Just wanted to let you know we're at the airport, boarding for Rome. We've had this trip planned for months. And now that Tyler's between jobs again, we thought we'd bring him too. The doctor said you'd be in the hospital for a while, so really, there's no point in us just sitting around in Portland when we could be seeing the Colosseum." "Right in the background," my father chimed in, his voice half laughing. "Tell her not to call. Roaming's too expensive." "Oh yes," my mom added. "Don't call us. Sweetie, just email if it's urgent. We'll be back in 3 weeks." Then came Tyler's voice, clear and thoughtless. "Thanks for the spending money. Maddie, ciao, Bella." The message ended, and somewhere beneath the broken bones and bruised organs, a deeper kind of wound tore open, the kind no surgeon could fix. The silence after the voicemail was louder than any siren I had heard the night of the crash. I stared at the screen, the words echoing in my head like an aftershock. "Thanks for the spending money. Maddie, ciao, Bella." Tyler's voice had always carried that air of entitlement, but hearing it now, knowing I was lying in a hospital bed with rods in my legs and staples in my abdomen, turned something in me cold. They had gone to Rome, not in spite of my accident, but knowingly, after it, and worse. They'd used my money to do it. I lay back against the pillow, the weight of the truth pressing into my chest, sharper than any rib fracture. I could hear the machines beeping steadily beside me, feel the IV tug gently at the back of my hand, but none of it grounded me. I wasn't just in pain, I was unraveling. The morphine drip was within reach, a button I was supposed to press when the physical pain became too much. I didn't press it. I wanted to feel it all: the bruised bones, the raw incision across my stomach, the dull ache in my chest. It was the only thing reminding me I still existed. Sophie returned to check on me, and found me silently shaking, tears soaking the thin hospital blanket. She said nothing at first, just stood beside me, watching with eyes that didn't look away. When I finally managed to whisper, They went to Italy. She blinked slowly, her jaw tightened, not in surprise, but in something closer to restrained anger. They left yesterday, I added, voice brittle. They knew I was here. Sophie nodded slowly. I've worked trauma care for 11 years. I've seen a lot of families. But this. She didn't finish the sentence. Later that evening, a nurse named Riley stopped by during her break. She brought me pudding and a ginger ale, said the food here was too depressing for recovery. She told me about her dog, a three-legged mutt who had survived a house fire. He still runs, she said with a shrug. Just sideways. I managed a small smile that lasted only a second. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I scrolled through social media with my unbandaged hand, searching for some sign that this was a misunderstanding. Maybe they had rescheduled. Maybe the voicemail was old. But there it was, on my mother's Facebook page, a photo of her, Dad, and Tyler holding up Italian airline tickets with the caption 21 days until our Roman holiday. It had been posted 3 weeks ago. They hadn't made the decision after my accident. They'd made it long before. And when the crash happened, they didn't cancel. They didn't even delay. Digging deeper, I found more. Group chats in the Carter family thread. Jokes about how expensive Rome would be. A message from my mother. We'll need to ask Maddie for a little extra this month. Tyler wants to do some shopping. My hands went numb. The nausea hit fast. I barely made it through the call button before everything went dark again. The following day, I asked for my credit card statements. Riley helped me log in. There it was. $15,000 charged to a luxury travel agency. Dated 2 days after the accident. 2 days after they stood at my bedside, while I was unconscious, and said nothing. The betrayal sat inside me like poison. The doctors said I was healing well, considering the extent of my injuries. But no one had a prognosis for the kind of damage I felt now. The kind that turns warmth into caution, that hollows out trust like dry rot. I wasn't sure if I was grieving my family, or the version of them I had convinced myself was real. Either way, it hurt more than the crash ever did. Dr. Monica Patel became a regular presence in my room. She wasn't just a surgeon. She carried herself with a calm gravity that made people soften when she entered. She checked my incisions, monitored my vitals. But it was her eyes I noticed most. How they lingered when I didn't speak. How they didn't flinch when I finally did. They used my money, I whispered one morning as she adjusted my chart. They went to Rome while I was in here, unconscious. She paused, not out of shock, but restraint. Then she exhaled slowly and said, "You didn't deserve that. That was all." No platitudes, no excuses. It was strange how much those 4 words could hold. Sophie kept showing up, too, not just for meds or vitals, but with real things, socks with rubber grips, lavender lotion, a playlist she swore made recovery less miserable. When I told her about the voicemail, her eyes went sharp, but she never said anything cruel about them. She didn't need to. Her presence alone made the contrast clear. My hospital roommate was a retired art teacher named Eleanor Bennett, 60, opinionated, recovering from gallbladder surgery and not afraid to make that everyone's problem. She didn't believe in hospital food or young doctors who rushed through explanations. When a resident tried to explain my care plan without checking if I was awake enough to understand, she cut him off mid-sentence. "She is family," she said, nodding at me. "And I want to hear every word again. But this time, in plain English." Eleanor called me Maddie, told me my mother was a fool, and claimed her daughter thought she was at bridge club every time she came to visit me. "But you're a better use of my time," she said once, placing a stack of crossword puzzles on my tray. "You remind me of her at your age, except you're stronger." I didn't feel strong, I felt like a shell, but I let her believe it. Somehow. It helped. As the days passed, the silence from my family stretched wider. I sent texts that were delivered but never answered, left voicemails that echoed into nothing. I tried Tyler, thinking maybe he'd at least check in. He responded once, "Can't talk. Gondola ride. Mom says nurses will take care of you. That's their job." That night, staring at the ceiling, I remembered my 16th birthday. My parents had promised a special dinner. I wore a new sweater I'd bought with babysitting money and waited by the window until it got dark. They canceled last minute. Tyler had a scrimmage. I ate store-bought cake alone, opened my own presents, smiled like it didn't matter. I remembered parents' weekend at college. Everyone else's families showed up with balloons and matching t-shirts. Mine didn't come. Dad had a golf tournament. You understand? Right, sweetheart. You're always so independent, Mom had said. I remembered my appendectomy 3 years ago. They came, briefly, sat with me through recovery, then left within the hour to catch a concert. It's just an appendix, she had said, laughing. It's not like you're dying. Each memory returned like a thread being pulled loose. It wasn't that the accident changed them. It was that the accident changed me. I began to see the pattern for what it was, not occasional thoughtlessness, but a habit of choosing everything else before me. And I had made it easy. I had been understanding, grateful, low maintenance, the kind of daughter who didn't make waves, the kind who said it's okay even when it wasn't. I used to think that being low maintenance made me easier to love. Now I wasn't so sure it made me lovable at all. But Sophie saw me. Eleanor defended me. Dr. Patel listened, and slowly, in that small white hospital room where I was supposed to be healing, I began to understand something far more painful than broken bones. I had never been the priority. Not even once. The morning light through the hospital window was soft, filtered by fog rolling off the Willamette. I had barely slept, but something had shifted inside me, quiet and firm. It wasn't anger, not exactly. It was awareness, a clarity that settled in my chest like the first deep breath after weeks underwater. I asked to speak with a social worker. Her name was Carmen Morales, and she walked into my room with a notepad, steady eyes, and the kind of calm that didn't rush. She sat beside my bed. Let me talk for over an hour without interruption. I told her everything. About the money, the Rome trip, the voicemail, the years of slow erosion I had mistaken for love. When I finished, she nodded once, like she'd heard it all before. What you're describing, she said gently, is financial exploitation and emotional abuse. She held up a hand before I could protest. I know you didn't grow up thinking of it that way. But when you're conditioned to believe that giving everything is how you earn love, it can be hard to see it for what it is. I didn't respond right away. She reached into her bag and pulled out a brochure. Plain white with blue text reclaiming boundaries, financial abuse in families. I stared at the title like it belonged to someone else's story. But it didn't. It was mine. Carmen connected me with a financial advisor, David Kim, who came to my room 2 days later, laptop in hand and eyes sharp with focus. He'd worked with clients recovering from similar situations, and after a brief introduction, he asked for my bank logins. We'll do this together, he said, but I want you to see it for yourself. And I did, line by line, recurring payments, transfers, account authorizations I had long forgotten. The evidence was clear. My parents had treated my finances as an extension of their own for years. My credit cards were active in Rome, still being used. Tyler's gym membership, my father's golf dues, my mother's online boutique orders. All of it ran through my accounts. You've been bankrolling their lifestyle, David said flatly. And they have no intention of stopping. I asked him what I could do, how to take back control without starting a war. You can't avoid a reaction, he said, but you can make it legal, clean, and documented. He introduced me to Jordan Ellis, a soft-spoken attorney with a sharp mind and a voice like calm water. Jordan specialized in family finance disputes. When I told him my story, he didn't flinch. You're not cutting them off out of revenge, he said. You're reclaiming your life, together. We built a strategy. First, remove all access, change passwords, close shared accounts, transfer assets to new banking systems. Second, stop all automatic payments, cancel anything tied to my name but not my needs. Third, document everything, save the voicemail, screenshot the social posts, print credit card statements, if they retaliated. And Jordan said they likely would. I'd have proof. Every step was deliberate, every move backed by law. That night, as Sophie wheeled in my dinner tray and cracked a joke about hospital mystery meat, I looked at her and said, I'm done letting them decide how I feel. She paused, reading my face. You're not just healing, she said. You're waking up. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't asking how much I could give. I was learning how to take something back. The morning we executed the plan, the sky over Portland was a muted gray, soft and steady, like a held breath. Sophie showed up early, a to-go coffee in one hand and determination in the other. She pulled a chair up beside my bed as I opened my laptop. We didn't say much. We didn't need to. There was a quiet understanding between us now, built over weeks of small kindnesses and long silences that never felt empty. I started with the banking, following David Kim's instructions. I removed my parents as authorized users on every account. I changed passwords, added two-step verification, and transferred my savings to a new institution entirely, one they had no ties to. The old accounts were closed within minutes. I canceled every automatic transfer, every standing payment that had been feeding money into their lives like a quiet current they never thought would stop. Next came the credit cards. I reported all three as compromised. The Rome charges were flagged for fraud investigation. The agent on the line asked if I'd authorized any travel-related expenses while hospitalized. I said no, calmly, and they launched a formal review. Sophie looked over at me as I ended the call. "That might be the first moment they realize something's changed," she said. I nodded. Then I logged into the airline website, found the confirmation number in my email, the one my father had used when he booked their return tickets home, and canceled the entire reservation. The refund posted to my account in partial credit. "They're going to be stranded," Sophie whispered. "Only temporarily," I said. "They have their own cards. They can pay their own way. For once." We moved methodically down the list. I called the leasing companies for both vehicles and ended the payment plans. I wasn't on the title for either car, so I had no legal obligation to keep paying. Tyler's sports car was parked at the airport. I arranged for it to be towed the following morning. The mortgage was trickier. I wasn't on the deed, but the $1,200 I had been wiring each month gone. So were the utility payments, cell phones, streaming services, club memberships. I even canceled the Wi-Fi. By midday, the connection had been severed completely, and still, there was one step left. "Is there anything of yours at their house you want to get back?" Sophie asked over lunch, her voice cautious. I paused. "My grandmother's jewelry," I said finally. "And my documents, birth certificate, tax records, old photos. My parents call it clutter. But it's mine." Sophie's brother, Danny, had a truck and a quiet strength I was grateful for. The hospital granted me a one-day pass. I signed out in a wheelchair, braced and bundled, and we drove in silence through the familiar streets that once led home. The house looked the same from the outside. Perfect lawn, red door, potted ferns. I still had a key. The security code hadn't changed. Inside, everything was as I remembered. And yet, not. We moved quickly. I directed Sophie to the filing cabinet in my dad's office. Danny went to the attic for boxes I'd labeled years ago. I went slowly to my old room, familiar and frozen in time. Posters from high school, a dusty bookshelf, a drawer full of things they had told me to sort through one day. I opened it now. Inside was a brochure for a retirement community in Florida. Paperclipped to it was a handwritten budget, monthly expenses, cost of living, and at the bottom, in my mother's careful script, Maddie to cover housing plus groceries. I stared at it for a long time. Then I opened Tyler's desk drawer. More brochures, real estate listings, a sticky note with Ask M for first 12 months. Frame it as family support. My breath caught in my throat. The plan had never been about my recovery. It had never been about Rome. They had been building a future funded by me, a future that didn't include me. We packed the last box in silence. As Danny loaded the truck, I took one final look at the kitchen table where we used to eat birthday cake, at the hallway lined with Tyler's framed trophies, at the living room that never displayed a single photo of me after high school. Then I turned away, not because I was angry, but because I finally understood. That house had never really been mine. 3 days after we left the house, the storm broke. It started at 2:08 a.m. My phone lit up like a slot machine, calls, texts, email alerts flooding in all at once. I hadn't blocked them completely. Not yet. Jordan had advised me to leave one line of communication open, something written, something traceable, so I'd left email. And now it was filling fast. Subject lines screamed louder than the messages inside them. What have you done? Fix this now. You're ruining your family. They were stranded in Florence. Their hotel declined the credit card. My mother couldn't book a return flight. My father had apparently tried to pay for dinner and been told the account was frozen. Tyler's message, sent at 2:12, read, I'm literally stuck in Italy with no money. What the hell? Maddie. By 2:30, the tone began to shift. My mother wrote, Honey, if this is about us taking the trip, we can talk about it when we're back. Please just unlock the accounts. Then my father, I don't know what's gotten into you. This isn't how family treats each other. Your mother is very upset. And you know her blood pressure. They were trying every door they could. Guilt, shame, panic. By dawn, it turned to threats. If you don't reverse this by the time we get home, don't expect to be part of this family anymore. I'm contacting a lawyer the moment we land. You're going to regret this. We all will. I showed Jordan the messages that morning. He read through them calmly, slowly, as if he'd seen them all before. They're lashing out because they lost control, he said. Stay the course. He helped me write a single response. No anger, no defense, just clarity. Subject, my response. I am currently recovering from life-threatening injuries after a major car accident. I have been in the hospital for over 6 weeks. During this time, you made the choice to take an international vacation using my credit card, without permission, and asked not to be contacted while you were away. I have reclaimed control of my finances. I will no longer be funding your lifestyle. Any further discussion must take place with a professional mediator present. Any threats or harassment will be documented and, if necessary, shared with legal authorities. Madeline, I hit send. Then I closed the laptop, placed it on the rolling table, and looked out the window toward the line of birch trees swaying outside. I waited for the familiar wave of panic, of guilt, of second-guessing, to return. But it didn't. What I felt instead was stillness. They had pushed me to the edge, and I had taken one step back, not forward, not over. I was still here, still healing, and for the first time, I wasn't shrinking myself to fit into someone else's definition of love. I had told the truth, calmly, clearly, and now, whatever came next, it would have to meet me where I stood. They arrived 5 days later, earlier than expected, their trip cut short by inconvenience, not remorse. The hospital called just after lunch. A nurse informed me, in a careful voice, that my family was in the lobby, demanding to see me. Sophie was already in the room when the call came through. She set down the water pitcher she'd just refilled and turned toward me. You don't have to see them, she said gently. Not today, not ever. That's your choice. But I had already decided. I need to, I said, adjusting the incline of my hospital bed. But I'm not doing it alone. She didn't hesitate. Then I'll be right here. I asked the nurse to bring them up and requested security nearby. Not for protection, but for peace of mind. Then I waited, my pulse steady. The fear that used to rise in my throat when I imagined confrontation didn't come this time. Just a clear, quiet readiness. They entered like a gust of heat. Voices too loud for a hospital. Footsteps too sharp for a hallway lined with pain. My mother looked disheveled, cheeks flushed from travel and frustration. My father's jaw was tight, his eyes scanning the room like a battlefield. Tyler followed behind them, arms crossed, sulking like a child denied dessert. They stopped short when they saw Sophie standing beside me. Who is she? My mother demanded. Tell her to leave. This is family business. She stays, I said, my voice calm. She's the one who's been here. You haven't. My father's eyes narrowed. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us, canceling our flights, freezing our cards, embarrassing us in front of our friends who had to wire us money. Embarrassing you, I repeated slowly. You left me in a hospital bed after a near-fatal car crash so you could go eat gelato and pose by fountains. And you're worried about embarrassment. We planned that trip months ago, my mother snapped. You were going to be in recovery for weeks. What were we supposed to do? Just sit around Portland and worry I could have died, I said quietly. She flinched, just for a second, then recovered. You're being dramatic. The doctor said you were stable. Actually, Sophie said, stepping forward. Her voice clipped and professional. She wasn't. Madeline had internal bleeding. There were complications. There was a real conversation about medically induced coma. But you wouldn't know that, would you? You were sightseeing. The room went silent. My family stared at her, momentarily stunned. Tyler broke first. "This isn't about the accident," he muttered. "It's about money. You've always acted like we're a burden just because you make a little more than the rest of us." A little more, I almost laughed. "Tyler, I've been paying for your car, your gym, your food. I paid for your bar tabs, your job hunting trips that were really beach weekends. I haven't been helping. I've been financing. We're your parents." My father cut in. "It's your responsibility to look after us. You're both in your early 60s and healthy," I said. "Most people your age are still working. And even if you weren't, there's a difference between helping and being used." The room swelled with the tension of old roles cracking. They tried guilt again. "We sacrificed everything for you," my mother whispered. "They tried gaslighting. You're remembering things wrong. They even tried doubt. Are you sure you're okay?" "Maddie, maybe the head trauma is affecting your judgment, but none of it landed, because I wasn't 16 anymore. I wasn't waiting at a window for them to show up." I reached for the folder Jordan had prepared, resting on the side table like an anchor. "These," I said, handing it to my father, "are the terms under which I'm willing to continue having a relationship with you." His face darkened with each page. "This is insulting. We're your parents, not your business partners." "No," I said. "You're people who have taken from me without permission, and this is how we move forward. If at all." My mother's lips thinned. "And if we say no, then you leave me," I said evenly. "For good this time." They stood there for a beat too long. Then they turned. No apology, no agreement, just retreat. Tyler lingered a second longer. "You really think this is going to fix anything?" he asked. "No," I said. "But it ends what's been breaking me." And when the door shut behind them, the silence that followed didn't feel empty. It felt earned. The days after their visit were quiet, mercifully so. No more emails, no more threats. Just the gentle rhythm of healing medication at 7 a.m., physical therapy at 10 meals brought on trays that grew less offensive with time. My body was still stiff, my steps uncertain, but I was no longer bracing for impact, physical or emotional. Sophie remained a steady presence, slipping in during breaks, bringing coffee or books or just silence. She never pushed, just sat beside me like she had nothing more important to be doing. Even when I knew she did, my therapist, Dr. Stern, helped me process the confrontation in pieces. "When someone stops playing the role they were assigned in a dysfunctional system," she said, "everyone else panics. Your strength will always look like betrayal to those who benefited from your silence." That truth became my compass. By the 8th week, I was walking short distances with a cane and able to shower on my own. I returned to work part-time, grateful for a manager who had held my position and never asked for explanations. My coworkers decorated my desk with welcome back balloons and a card signed in Sharpie by everyone in the department. I sat down at my terminal and realized this, too, was home, financially. Things stabilized slowly, without the burden of supporting 3 adults. My bank account began to breathe again. I opened a new savings plan. I began sketching out a modest goal, a down payment on something small, something mine, a place where I could plant things and know they wouldn't be dug up. Then, unexpectedly, Tyler reached out. He showed up one Saturday afternoon at the rehab center where I still did weekly sessions. He looked smaller somehow, less confident, more real. He held a cup of coffee and a folded piece of paper, and sat across from me without touching either. "I still think you're wrong about Mom and Dad," he said. "But I wanted you to know what they said about you in the car. After we left the hospital, it wasn't right. It wasn't an apology. Not exactly. But it was more than I'd ever expected. And in that moment, it was enough." Over the next few weeks, he started texting once in a while, not to ask for anything, just to talk. He told me he was applying for a job in IT support. a position I happened to know someone was hiring for. I made a call, left it in their hands. 2 months later, he sent a picture of his first paycheck with a single line, "I did it." I replied, "I know." As for my parents, reality caught up with them. They sold the house within 3 months of losing my support. My father found a part-time job teaching history at a community college. My mother started working at a bookstore 2 days a week, shelving novels for minimum wage. For the first time, they had to live inside their own means. It didn't break them, but it humbled them. They tried to reach out, sometimes through guilt, sometimes through updates, occasionally through subtle requests for help. I never blocked them, but I never gave without terms again. I kept my boundaries simple. Any support required transparency, written agreement, and mutual accountability. I wasn't their bank, I wasn't their safety net, I was their daughter, and that meant they had to treat me like one. Some might call it cold, others distant. I called it peace, because for the first time in my adult life, I wasn't living in reaction to anyone else's need. I wasn't shrinking myself for someone else's comfort. I wasn't bending under the weight of invisible expectations. I was building something new, quietly, firmly, on my own terms. The apartment I eventually moved into wasn't large, but it was mine. A first-floor unit with wide doorways, soft lighting, and a little balcony that caught the morning sun just right. I bought a table that seated 6, even though for a long time it was just me. There was something healing in setting a place for what might be. Sophie was the first person who saw it. She brought over takeout the night I signed the lease. Thai food in brown paper bags. Her scrubs still creased from a double shift. We ate on the floor with borrowed pillows and talked about everything except hospitals. That night, after she left, I realized I hadn't checked my phone in hours. I hadn't waited for someone to call. I hadn't thought about whether my absence was disappointing anyone. I was fully present. And that felt new. Our connection grew slowly, in the quiet, careful way trust tends to build when it's been broken before. We didn't call it anything. We didn't need to. But she became the person I texted first, the one I saved my stories for, the name I reached for in a moment of quiet joy or quiet fear. Her presence never asked for anything. It simply stayed. In time, I reached back out to people I had lost touch with, friends from college, coworkers I'd once turned down for happy hour because there was always another family need to rush home for. I started saying yes to invitations, even when I felt unsure. I learned how to be in rooms where no one expected me to fix anything. Just show up. Through Carmen's referral, I joined a support group for survivors of trauma. Every Saturday morning, we sat in a sunlit community center, folding chairs in a circle, passing stories like offerings. Some had lost spouses, others had survived accidents, illnesses, betrayals. No one gave advice. We just listened. I told my story for the first time not as a series of events, but as something I'd lived through. And when I finished, no one asked why I hadn't walked away sooner. They just nodded. They understood. That group became a tether, a place where I could be whole, even in pieces. Months later, when I was finally able to carry grocery bags without needing a break, I hosted my first real dinner, nothing fancy, just roasted vegetables, pasta, and a lemon tart Sophie insisted on baking herself. Around that table sat people who had shown up for me in the quiet: Sophie, Carmen, Dr. Stern, 2 friends from college, and Eleanor, who now came every third Sunday with puzzles and sharp commentary on hospital politics. We ate slowly. We laughed easily. No one raised their voice. No one brought guilt. When we clinked glasses, I didn't make a speech. I just looked around the table and realized this was family, not by blood, not by obligation, but by choice. And for the first time, I wasn't trying to earn my seat. I belonged. 1 year after the accident, I stood by the window of my apartment, the city stretching wide and soft beneath a quiet sky. Portland at night doesn't try to dazzle. It hums. The lights blink in soft clusters. The wind moves gently between buildings. It was a kind of stillness I hadn't known how to crave until I found it. I held a mug of tea between my hands, half warm, mostly forgotten, and watched headlights trace slow arcs down the street below. Behind me, the apartment was calm. clean plates in the sink, a folded throw blanket on the couch, the last echoes of laughter from dinner still lingering in the corners of the room. Sophie had left just 20 minutes earlier. Her jacket had smelled faintly of rosemary and rain, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like something was missing. The scar along my side still pulled on cold nights. My legs ached after long walks, but I had made peace with the marks that healing left behind. The bigger changes, the ones no one could see, took longer. Learning how to stop apologizing for needing space, how to speak without waiting to be interrupted, how to make choices without checking if they made someone else uncomfortable. A year ago, I would have called it selfish. Now, I just called it mine. There are still moments when memories arrive without warning. My 16th birthday, the voicemail from Rome, the conversation in that hospital room. But when they do, they don't undo me anymore. They remind me of what I survived, of who I became when the illusion finally shattered. For a long time, I thought the accident ruined my life, but it didn't. It ruined the lie I had been living inside. That love had to be earned through sacrifice. That silence was a form of loyalty. That giving more would one day be enough to be seen. And once that lie collapsed, I was free to build something real. I don't chase approval anymore. I don't pay to be needed, and I no longer wait to be chosen. I choose myself. Every morning, every time, every quiet, beautiful night like this one.